It's a classic American story. Innovators and entrepreneurs roll up their sleeves and create a new product that transforms the culture. And in the 2020s, it happened again. A technological breakthrough with the potential to remake society. It wasn't AI. It wasn't Ozempic. This breakthrough was making it easier than ever before to lose all of your money. It's in our blood. America is a nation of risk takers. We've settled the West. We've raced for the moon. And most risky of all, we've occasionally put a week's pay on the Cleveland Browns to cover the spread. Yes, gambling is something that's been in the country's DNA pretty much from the beginning. In the early 1600s, the leaders of the Jamestown colony were complaining about too many people playing dice. In the 1660s, another group of colonists set to work making sure their new settlement had all the essentials. So after building shelter and building a church, they immediately built a horse racing track. We probably don't have to tell you this was on Long Island. But let's be honest, gambling may be an enduring feature of American life, but so is our ambivalence about it. We know that this isn't the world's healthiest pastime, which is probably one of the reasons that historically we've cordoned it off to a select few locations. Up until recently, you couldn't just gamble anywhere. You'd have to schlep to some slightly seedy place like Atlantic City or Las Vegas, a city so aware of its own reputation that it was explicitly telling people not to talk about what goes on there. These days, however, America's biggest casino is your phone. And the hottest game in town is online sports gambling. Now, if it seems like this came out of nowhere, that's because it kind of did. For most of the past century, Nevada was pretty much the only place in America where you could legally bet on sports. But after a 2018 Supreme Court ruling gave the other 49 states the ability to legalize sports gambling, we were off to the races. As of early 2025, 40 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized some form of sports gambling, with 34 of them allowing online betting. And to say business is booming is an understatement. In 2018, the year of that Supreme Court decision, total sports betting revenue in the United States was around $430 million. By 2023, it had reached over $11 billion. And by early 2024, the parent company of the popular sports betting site FanDuel had surpassed the actual real-world casinos of the Las Vegas Sands Corporation to become the most valuable gaming company in the country. That's one of the most important statistics for understanding the current state of sports gambling in America. But here's the other. According to polling from Pew, the proportion of Americans who think that legalized sports gambling is a good thing for the country is 8%. So, how do we reconcile those two data points? How can it be that Americans are pouring more money than ever into legal sports gambling while being ambivalent at best and downright hostile at worst about its very existence? Well, a big part of the story is that all that money the gambling companies are bringing in is coming from a surprisingly small number of people. In fact, about 50% of their revenue comes from just 3% of gamblers. And that points to an uncomfortable truth about sports betting. This is a business model that depends on addiction. Now, to be clear, this is not to pass sweeping judgment on sports gambling. The vast majority of people who play just treat it as harmless entertainment and find it easy to walk away. Researchers found that the median gambler on a sports app deposits $136 over the course of 5 years, which isn't anyone's definition of a crisis. Hell, it's not even anyone's definition of fun. But if you're the kind of person who's prone to gambling problems, a population that's estimated to include over 10 million Americans, having a virtual sportsbook in your pocket is a surefire recipe for disaster. And a lot of the arguments in favor of sports gambling rely on blurring the lines between those two groups. A vice president at the American Gaming Association, for instance, has defended sports gambling by noting that bettors know they're likely to lose money, saying it's not an investment, it's an entertainment option, which would make a fair amount of sense if it actually represented the views of the people doing the gambling. But when surveyed by pollsters, the number one reason people betting on sports say they do it is to make extra money, an answer given by 2/3 of them. And in fact, nearly 1/3 of them say that they view gambling as an investment. And folks, that's like saying you view tequila as a hydration strategy. The house always wins, after all, and when it comes to online sports betting, we know by exactly how much. A study of over 700,000 gamblers that tracked them for nearly 5 years found that less than 5% of them ended up withdrawing more money than they deposited, which, again, is probably not that big a deal for the casual gambler, but is a huge problem for the compulsive gambler, especially because these companies go to extreme lengths to keep the compulsive gambler hooked. In 2024, a New Jersey woman sued the sports betting site DraftKings after her husband lost over $940,000 of her family's money, some of it taken from their young children's savings accounts, over a 4-year period. Why was she blaming the site rather than her spendthrift husband? Because she alleges DraftKings was constantly trying to entice him with VIP status, free trips, and Apple products, despite the fact that they knew he was a problem gambler because, as part of that VIP status, company representatives were talking with him every day. And despite the company's official policy of making high-dollar bettors turn over financial records to prove they aren't overcommitting, they nevertheless ignored that he was at one point wagering more than 4 times as much as his annual salary of $175,000. And feeding these addictions can have tragic consequences. The American Psychiatric Association reports that gambling disorders carry a higher risk of suicide than any other addictive behavior, including substance abuse, with 1 out of every 5 problem gamblers attempting suicide. And with the rapid rise of legal sports betting in recent years, we've seen a wave of similarly grim statistics. Between 2019 and 2024, calls to the National Gambling Helpline Network nearly doubled. One study found that following the legalization of online sports betting, bankruptcies spiked by 25 to 30%. Another found that domestic violence rates increased following legalization, particularly when the local NFL franchise had an upset loss. All of which should be cause for reflection. Optimizing gambling to be as easy and efficient as possible also means optimizing it to make addicts as vulnerable as possible. Is that trade-off worth it? That's the question that'll face the states that still have to decide this question, and the ones that are having second thoughts. Let's hope they can find a solution that does right by the people plagued by addiction. And for those who still feel compelled to risk it all, just remember the words of our forefathers. What happens at the Colonial Long Island racetrack stays at the Colonial Long Island racetrack.